She sat in the same corner of the federal courthouse every day for 12 years, fingers flying across the stenography machine with mechanical precision. Elena Rodriguez was invisible to the attorneys who rushed past her desk, just another court reporter capturing words that would fade into legal archive. The young prosecutors barely acknowledged her existence, seeing only an aging woman in a simple blouse who typed what they said. They had no idea that the quiet stenographer taking notes on their cases had once been the most feared federal prosecutor on the East Coast, or that she'd walked away from a partnership track at the nation's most prestigious law firm. When Judge Harrison stepped into the courtroom that Tuesday morning and his eyes met Elena's across the room, everything changed, because some people never forget a legend, even when that legend chooses to disappear. Welcome to Secrets Never Told. Before we continue with this powerful story, tell us in the comments which city you're watching from, and if you believe stories about hidden heroes deserve to be heard, hit that subscribe button. The United States District Court for the Southern District of New York operated with clockwork precision. Courtroom 14A had seen landmark cases, but Tuesday morning felt different. Elena Rodriguez settled into her stenography desk, adjusting equipment with practiced efficiency. At 48, she moved with quiet grace, dark hair pulled back in a simple bun. Her navy blazer was professional but unremarkable, chosen to blend into the background. Young associates hurried past carrying case files, expensive suits marking them as tomorrow's legal elite. None looked twice at Elena. Court reporters were furniture, necessary but invisible. "Morning, Elena," Deputy Clerk Margaret Chen called, the same polite greeting she'd offered for 3 years. Elena pulled up the case file. United States versus Morrison Industries, complex federal fraud that had been building for 18 months. This was career-making prosecution, the kind that separated competent attorneys from legends. Assistant District Attorney James Patterson entered with his team, Harvard Polish, evident in every step. At 32, he radiated confidence. They nodded cordially to Elena, the same acknowledgement they'd offer any court employee. Morrison Industries had hired Kellerman, Ross & Associates, Manhattan's most prestigious white-collar defense firm. Lead counsel Robert Kellerman commanded the room upon entering, silver hair and $1,000 suit, announcing his status. At 9:30 a.m. sharp, Judge William Harrison entered. At 62, he carried 30 years of federal law interpretation with dignity. He settled into his chair and began his customary room survey, acknowledging attorneys with brief nods. Then his eyes found Elena. The change was subtle but unmistakable. Surprise flickered across his features, followed by recognition. Judge Harrison's scanning pause extended several seconds beyond protocol, his attention fixed on the stenographer's desk with unusual intensity. Elena met his gaze calmly, offering the same professional nod she'd given hundreds of judges. But something passed between them, silent communication speaking of shared history and mutual respect. "Counsel for prosecution, please state your opening arguments," Judge Harrison announced. Ada Patterson rose confidently. "Ladies and gentlemen, the government will prove beyond reasonable doubt that Morrison Industries engaged in systematic securities fraud, defrauding investors of over $200 million. Elena's fingers moved with fluid precision, capturing every word. Patterson's delivery was competent but conventional. She'd heard similar openings from prosecutors who believed passion could substitute for legal precision. As Patterson continued, Elena found herself analyzing his approach from a perspective she'd thought abandoned. His evidence was solid, but not overwhelming. His narrative lacked surgical precision necessary to dismantle Kellerman's caliber of defense. The morning progressed with typical federal efficiency. Elena captured everything, her machine creating perfect record of proceedings destined for legal history. During lunch recess, the courtroom emptied quickly. Elena remained, reviewing transcription. She was alone when Judge Harrison approached. "Elena Rodriguez," he said quietly, judicial formality softening. "I thought that was you." "Judge Harrison? It's been a long time. 15 years. Last time I saw you, you were arguing Castellanos before the Second Circuit. Masterful legal work." Judge Harrison studied her face, searching for explanation. "Elena, may I ask, what happened? You were on track to become the youngest U.S. attorney in district history." "Life happened, Your Honor. Priorities changed." "But your talent. The Castellanos conviction was art. Complex money laundering, international banking fraud. You dismantled their entire operation with surgical precision." Judge Harrison leaned closer, lowering his voice. "Elena, this case, Morrison Industries, it's remarkably similar to Castellanos. Same financial instruments, same laundering techniques." Elena's expression remained neutral, but her fingers paused over stenography keys. "I'm sure Ada Patterson has everything well in hand." "Patterson is competent, but this case requires more than incompetence. Morrison's defense team will exploit every procedural weakness. They have resources and experience that could overwhelm a prosecutor who doesn't understand deeper complexities. Your Honor, I'm just the court reporter. As afternoon session began, Elena noticed subtle changes. Judge Harrison's questions became more probing. Patterson's examination revealed both strengths and limitations. His questions were methodical but lacked strategic depth necessary to establish complex financial connections. Defense counsel Kellerman's cross-examination was masterful, systematically undermining witness credibility while planting reasonable doubt seeds about the government's evidence interpretation. By day's end, prosecution's case appeared solid but not overwhelming. Kellerman had demonstrated that Morrison Industries' financial practices, while unconventional, might fall within legal boundaries. The next morning brought unexpected complications. Elena arrived to find Patterson's team in heated discussion. The Yamamoto testimony is crucial, Patterson was saying to Sarah Kim. Without it, we can't establish international banking connections that prove intent to defraud. Kim shook her head grimly. Tokyo confirmed this morning. Yamamoto can't travel. Family emergency. Elena settled into position, unconsciously listening to the prosecution's dilemma. Yamamoto's testimony was indeed crucial. She'd read enough case file to understand that Tokyo Bank executives' evidence would establish international scope of Morrison Industries' alleged fraud. Judge Harrison entered precisely on time. Morning proceedings began with Patterson's motion to admit remote testimony. Kellerman's objection was swift. Your Honor, prosecution cannot substitute remote testimony when case preparation proves inadequate. Judge Harrison ruled. Motion for remote testimony is denied. However, I'm willing to grant brief recess to allow prosecution to explore alternative approaches. During recess, Elena overheard Patterson's continued strategizing. Without Yamamoto, we need to establish international banking connections through documentary evidence alone. But Kellerman will challenge authentication of every document. Elena's fingers paused over keyboard. Castellanos' case had involved nearly identical international banking structures. She'd spent months learning intricacies of offshore financial instruments. When court resumed, Patterson announced prosecution's decision to proceed without Tokyo testimony, relying on documentary evidence. Elena could see relief in Kellerman's expression as he realized the government's case had become significantly more vulnerable. Afternoon testimony focused on FBI financial analyst Marcus Webb, whose job was explaining Morrison Industries' banking practices to the jury. Webb was competent, but his presentation lacked narrative clarity necessary to make complex financial concepts accessible. Kellerman's cross-examination was devastating. He systematically challenged Webb's interpretations, suggesting alternative explanations that painted Morrison Industries as aggressive but legitimate international business. By second day's end, prosecution's case appeared struggling. Elena had seen similar scenarios. Competent attorneys overwhelmed by financial evidence complexity they didn't fully understand. As the courtroom emptied, Judge Harrison lingered at the bench. When the room was finally empty except for them, he approached again. Elena, may I speak frankly? Of course, Your Honor. Prosecution's case is in trouble. They have solid evidence, but they're struggling to present it demonstrating criminal intent necessary for conviction. I'm sure they'll find their footing. Will they? Elena, you know these financial structures better than anyone in this building. Castellanos' case established precedents directly applicable to Morrison Industries. That was a long time ago, Your Honor. Legal knowledge doesn't expire, Elena. Justice requires more than good intentions. It requires expertise applied with precision. Elena closed her equipment case. Your Honor, I'm just the court reporter. My job is to record what happens, not influence it. Judge Harrison was quiet for a long moment. Elena, would you be willing to stay late tomorrow evening? I have some administrative matters that might require additional stenographic support. Elena looked at him directly, understanding the subtext. What kind of administrative matters? The kind that occasionally require informal consultation with individuals who possess specialized knowledge. That evening, Elena sat in her apartment reviewing the day's events. Judge Harrison's words echoed. Justice requires more than good intentions. She'd walked away from prosecution work 15 years ago after Castellanos' case, burned out by intensity and personal cost. The decision to become a court reporter had offered anonymity and stability. She'd found peace in stenographer's neutrality, recording history without being responsible for its outcome. But Morrison Industries' case was different. Elena recognized financial structures because she dismantled nearly identical criminal enterprises. She could see connections that eluded Patterson, understand evidence patterns that would convince a jury. Elena made her decision. The next morning, she arrived 30 minutes early and went directly to prosecution's temporary office. Patterson was already there, looking increasingly stressed. Mr. Patterson, Patterson. Could I speak with you privately? Patterson looked up, surprised. Of course. Is there something wrong with court reporting equipment? No, sir. I wanted to discuss something related to your case. Elena remained standing. Mr. Patterson, I've been following your case, and I believe you're missing some important connections in the financial evidence. I'm sorry. What do you mean? Morrison Industries is using correspondent banking relationships to layer their money laundering operations. The key is proving intent to conceal rather than legitimate business purpose. Patterson stared at her, confusion evident. Elena, I appreciate your interest, but court reporters aren't typically involved in case strategy. No, sir, they're not. But I used to be a federal prosecutor. The words hung in the air. Patterson's expression shifted from confusion to disbelief. You were a prosecutor. When? Where? Southern District of New York, 1995 to 2008. I specialized in complex financial fraud and international money laundering. Patterson leaned back, processing this information. You're Elena Rodriguez. I know that name. You prosecuted Castellanos' case. Yes, that was legendary work. Castellanos' organization was considered untouchable until you dismantled their entire money laundering network. You were supposed to become the youngest U.S. attorney in district history. What happened? Personal reasons. I chose a different path. Patterson stood up, his stress replaced by cautious excitement. Elena, if you're willing to help, we could use your expertise. This case is remarkably similar to Castellanos. I can't officially consult on the case. It would compromise my position as court reporter. Elena pulled a folder from her bag and placed it on Patterson's desk. Unofficial guidance, background information that might help you understand financial evidence more clearly. Patterson opened the folder to find detailed analysis of Morrison Industries' banking records, complete with annotations explaining criminal significance of each transaction pattern. Elena had worked through the night, applying 15 years of prosecutorial experience. This is extraordinary work. You've identified connections we missed completely. Morrison is using classic three-stage laundering operation, placement through legitimate business deposits, layering through correspondent banking relationships, and integration through offshore investment vehicles. For the next hour, Elena walked Patterson through financial evidence with surgical precision. She explained how to trace money movement across jurisdictions, how to identify suspicious transaction patterns, and how to present complex evidence convincing a jury. The jury needs to see the forest, not just the trees. Morrison's individual transactions might appear legitimate in isolation, but the overall pattern reveals systematic concealment of criminal proceeds. Patterson took detailed notes, his understanding of case complexities growing. Elena's explanations clarified evidence connections that had seemed unclear, revealing sophisticated criminal enterprise that Morrison Industries represented. Elena, this changes everything. With this level of understanding, we can rebuild our entire presentation strategy. Mr. Patterson, I need to be clear. This conversation never happened. I'm providing background information to help you understand technical aspects of financial evidence, not offering legal consultation. Understood. But Elena, why are you doing this? You chose to leave prosecution work. Why get involved now? Elena considered the question carefully. Because justice requires more than good intentions. It requires expertise applied with precision. Morrison Industries represents systematic fraud that will continue if they escape accountability. The fourth day brought noticeable changes in prosecution's approach. Patterson requested permission to recall FBI agent Torres for additional testimony, armed with new insights about financial evidence. Elena resumed her stenography position, maintaining professional neutrality while internally monitoring prosecution's improved presentation strategy. Patterson's questioning was more focused, his understanding markedly deeper. Agent Torres, let's examine Morrison Industries' banking records more carefully. These wire transfers to Pacific Island Banking Corporation, can you explain their timing and amounts? Torres, clearly better prepared, walked jury through transaction patterns that revealed systematic money laundering rather than legitimate business activity. Kellerman objected frequently, recognizing that prosecution's presentation had gained strategic clarity threatening his defense. But Judge Harrison allowed testimony to continue. Elena watched jury faces as Patterson methodically connected financial evidence into coherent criminal narrative. Several jurors who had appeared confused during earlier testimony now showed understanding, nodding as complex patterns were explained clearly. Kellerman attempted to challenge Torres's improved testimony, but the FBI agent was ready for every question. Elena realized that Patterson had used her analysis to prepare Torres for exactly the objections Kellerman would raise. Agent Torres, you're asking jury to believe that sophisticated international business practices are actually criminal conspiracy. Isn't it possible that Morrison Industries was simply managing currency exchange risk? Mr. Kellerman, legitimate Legitimate currency hedging doesn't require multiple offshore accounts in non-reporting jurisdictions. Morrison's banking patterns show deliberate structuring to avoid detection and reporting requirements. Torres's response was precise and confident, armed with technical knowledge that Elena had provided. Kellerman's attempts to create reasonable doubt were meeting stronger resistance than anticipated. By fourth day's end, momentum had shifted noticeably. Prosecution's case appeared stronger, more coherent, more convincing to a jury that now understood criminal significance of evidence. The fifth day brought prosecution's closing arguments, delivered by Patterson with newfound confidence and clarity. Elena listened as he systematically dismantled Morrison Industries' defense, using financial evidence to tell a compelling story of criminal conspiracy. Ladies and gentlemen, Morrison Industries wasn't engaged in aggressive international business. They were operating sophisticated money laundering enterprise designed to defraud investors and conceal criminal proceeds. The evidence shows systematic deception, deliberate concealment, and criminal intent beyond any reasonable doubt. After 4 hours of deliberation, jury returned with guilty verdicts on all counts. Morrison Industries would face criminal penalties and asset forfeiture that would effectively shut down their operations and compensate defrauded investors. As courtroom erupted in quiet celebration from prosecution team, Elena maintained professional neutrality, recording verdict with same precision she brought to every case. But internally, she felt satisfaction of justice served. Complex financial crimes required expertise to prosecute effectively, and she'd provided that expertise in a way that preserved both legal process integrity and her professional position. Later that evening, as Elena prepared to leave courthouse, Patterson approached her desk one final time. "Elena, I don't know how to thank you. Your insights made all the difference. You did the work, Mr. Patterson. I just provided some background information. We both know it was more than that. You could have stayed silent, maintained complete neutrality. Why did you choose to help?" Elena considered the question as she packed final files. "Because neutrality isn't always neutral. When I have knowledge that can prevent injustice, silence becomes complicity." Patterson nodded thoughtfully. "Would you ever consider returning to prosecution work? The U.S. Attorney's Office could use someone with your expertise." Elena smiled, the first completely genuine smile she'd allowed herself in days. "Thank you, but no. I found my place here. The legal system needs people in all kinds of roles, not just visible ones." As she walked through courthouse corridors, Elena reflected on the strange path that had brought her to this moment. 15 years ago, she'd been Elena Rodriguez, federal prosecutor, building career on high-profile convictions. Now she was Elena Rodriguez, court reporter, recording history from shadows and finding purpose in work others considered invisible. Morrison Industries' case had reminded her that justice didn't always require spotlight, that sometimes the most important contributions came from those who chose to serve without seeking credit. She'd found her way to serve justice. Sometimes the most important people in any system were those who chose contribution over recognition, who understood that truth needed the right tools to prevail over deception. Elena Rodriguez had found her place, and justice was stronger for it.